Over the past 10 seasons, you have watched as I transform right before your very eyes from a caterpillar with a taste of the agricultural built in a shed in the southeast of England to a butterfly that appreciates all that Zuffenhausen brings to this planet. Specifically, GT3 Tourings at the top, followed by something with a Targa, ideally a 67 soft window, or even a 991.14S with a manual transmission and colored seatbelts. But third is something I've never shared with you, and that is the Fumsigiata 991.1. Now, I have two friends of mine that own these cars. I hate them because they have them. But this is not something I love in third place because it's the fastest or the best Neunefler out there. It is the most iconic. And that is exactly how you and I are going to kick off season 10 of the old show, by driving the latest derivation of one of the most iconic cars on this planet, the 8th generation Porsche Neunefler. Welcome to Circuit Ricardo Tormo. 14 very technical corners over 4.005K. That said, let's start with the basic building block that is the 3-liter flat six twin turbocharged direct fuel injected 10.2 to 1 compression ratio, complete with an integrated dry sump lubrication system. Whew. With that, now the changes. First, the turbochargers, they are symmetrical, which means they go in opposite directions. From there, the turbine wheel, the diameter increases to 48 millimeters. The compressor wheel, that increases to 55 millimeters. That's 4 millimeter increase if you're wondering. From there, the direct injection system, that changes. Basically, higher pressure injectors. I can bore you with the engineering, but that's way above my pay grade. From there, the intake system changes, and what happens there is it works in conjunction with an asymmetrical intake valve system. And what that does, again, I could bore you with the engineering, way above my pay grade, probably couldn't explain it as well as one of the engineers here, but it translates to a little bit more fuel efficiency while simultaneously increasing the output. So what is the output? 443 horsepower that comes in at 6,500 RPM and 390 pounds of torque, which comes in at 2,300 RPM and stays flat all the way up to 5,000 RPM. Here we go out on a nice straight, foot to the floor. Oh my God, this has a little bit more power. Wow, what a difference. Didn't expect that at all. You can clearly tell this thing is breathing better because it delivers power so much quicker. It's like a noticeable difference. Coming around, wind out, and notice, oh, there's so much more top end here. You know we had to talk about construction, and not just construction, but the materials that go into construction, especially when someone is kind enough to drag this size of show and tell all the way down from Zuffenhausen, and one in a very odd shade of lime green and silver that is a naked 992. And really what this shows is the percent content between steel and aluminum. A couple of other things follow me here. So the biggest change between a 991 and a 992 in terms of construction is the percent of aluminum and steel. Believe it or not, a 991, that was 63% steel. Now it's down to 30% steel. And really the biggest change is all of the outer body panels are aluminum. Now there's still high strength steel. That is mainly the passenger cage, A pillar, as well as B pillar. There's also some high strength steel in the bottom of the car, as well as extruded aluminum, and that's to add structure but also lower the weight. Now speaking of weight, technically I could tell you that this whole body in white is 12 kilograms lower. Not a huge number, not going to focus on it, because overall the weight of the vehicle is up. The base car, the two-wheel drive car, is 3,382 pounds, and the four-wheel drive car, really should say the all-wheel drive car, is 3,487 pounds. But really the big change here is two. Number one, the torsional structural rigidity, whatever you want to call it, is now up 5%. And number two, and I think this is a huge fun fact, this piece here This one piece, this is the one thing that used to be steel in the outer body of the 991. Now it's aluminum, and it wasn't just about finding a supplier that could make this kind of form here, because that's very hard to do. Porsche went out and not just found a supplier, they bought the supplier. First thing you notice is improved driving dynamics. The extra width of this thing, and you do feel it coming around the technical parts of this track. Like, there's stability. I mean, it already had stability in 991.1 and .2, but here it's just that much more sharp. I'd love to sit here and tell you that it has more megapascals of strength because of the reduction of steel and the increase of the content of aluminum. It probably has something to do with the way this car drives now, but I can't sit here and tell you it's 5% or 25%. Active Aero, not exactly something new to fancy sports cars, especially 911. However, there have been some changes, perhaps refreshes we'll call them. Remember when you and I were looking online at every different spy shot of this car? The one thing you could tell that was very different is the rear end. And that translates to a spoiler that has 45% more surface area, translates to more downforce. That is the non-active part. The active part is this versus this. So that is up to 56 miles an hour. If the charge air coolers are a little hot, it comes up as early as 37 miles an hour. In this case, this is the performance position, which provides more downforce. Now, Active Aero, it ain't just in the back, it's also in the front of the car, where there are slats that open and close, kind of like a Hyundai Elantra Eco, to increase the aerodynamic efficiency, which is 0.31 in this case. But then up to 43 miles an hour, it stays closed. Somewhere between 43 and 93 miles an hour, it can open, again, depending on a couple of different circumstances. Let's get back into this straight and see how fast we can get here. This is full flat out. The engine, at least the mounting of the engine, sits a bit farther forward, not the engine itself. Remember the 991.1, they moved it an inch farther forward, so it's the same placement here. I'd love to tell you there's a difference and you feel it, not really, but ultimately the same feeling of the limited pitch, squat, dive, and roll, I would argue lean from side to side is non-existent because of some of the small changes they've done to the setup on this thing. You know I love me some naked bits, and this is about the best set of naked bits I could find here in Valencia, so let's geek out over two things. Number one, the third stoplight, one of the better integrations I've ever seen, so vielen Dank. And number two, the charge air coolers. Now the 991.2 was no stranger to charge air coolers. There were two of them. They were placed here and here. The engineers in Zuffenhausen decided to change the placement, so they moved them from here to here. There are still two of them. You can't see the second one over here. And there's really two things going on. Number one, they sit above the engine, so they take advantage of this grille here, kind of like an old school ram air induction like they had on Pontiacs. You know, I love me some Pontiacs. But it's not just that. The actual capacity of the charge air coolers is larger. Completely flat out. And just listen to how much more explosive that is. Once you get above, say, 4,500, 5,000 RPM, God, this thing is so good. It was already good, but it's even better now because if you told me that just by changing where the intercoolers are and making them more volume, I wouldn't expect it to be this big of a difference. But it's a noticeable difference to the point where it almost changes the top-end character of this engine. Now, if you're keeping track, we saw the production version of the 992 in LA just last year. And then it was just last week that we saw the production version of the 992 convertible. Well, apparently someone from Zuffenhausen decided to bring the forbidden fruit that is the convertible. We can't drive it. Hopefully we get to drive it in the very near future. But for now, let's use it as a great stand-in to talk about the interior. And there's a number of things going on here. First and foremost, name, rank, and serial number is those screens. So it's not just the infotainment screen here that goes from 7 inches to 10.9 inches, but they pilfered the TFT screens from the Cayenne and the Panamera that now sit or really flank the sides of the religion that is the rev counter that still is analog in the 992. Then there's obviously the choice between Bose and Burmester. I would argue you always got to go with the Burmester and a 911. Then there's color and trim. In this case, you got this brown, which in the silver works really well, but they showed us a bunch of different colors, like you could do lime green if you want. They even showed us this agave green. It didn't look great, but at least I take my hat off to them for the different color choices. Then, you know, you and I have been talking about haptic feedback and how it's not safe in a 2-ton vehicle, not that this is 2 tons, but here someone's been listening because it's a combination of haptic feedback here and here, but real old school toggle switches, 5 here, 3 here, and then knobs here. And believe it or not, there's nothing going on here. This, I think, is a spacer for the manual transmission, which is still on offer, thankfully. And then put all that aside, because I was talking with Matthias Koller, you remember him. He was the guy that came up with the design for the 991. Now, he's like the guy that puts the right people in the right places of design at Porsche, and he was telling me there's 3 different generations of interior design when it comes to 911s. I don't know if this is something that Ferry Porsche came up with back in '63, or if they're looking backwards on this, but either way, it goes as follows. From '63 to '88, there was this horizontal design theme. And then from '88 to really 2011, there's this very vertical theme, and that's to integrate the screens, really navigation screens and UX into the cars. But now they're going into this 3rd generation where they're putting in this horizontal design theme again, which I gotta say I didn't get at the LA Auto Show until Matthias described it to me. Now I completely see the lineage from the 901 into now the 992. When I sat through the presentation with the vice president of this entire product, and even before that, doing the research, it said it's 11% more direct steering. And I'm like, yada, 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 yeah, whatever you gotta tell me. But look at this. You point and it goes. And now, most people who've never driven a 911 don't understand that. 911s have their own character. There's a certain understeer when you get to speed with a 911, and that's just the way they are, and it makes you more of an attentive driver, or you get more engaged driving a 911, and I would argue that's the thing that gets people more excited about 911s. But here, up to a certain point, that direct steering thing works really well, like here at a lower speed, but if I put my foot into it, you do get a little bit of that 911 feel in the front end. And keep in mind, this is a 2-wheel drive car, so it's more noticeable here. So a sunroof is a sunroof is a sunroof. Well, not exactly when it comes to the 992 for 2 reasons. Remember we talked about the structure, how the entire body panels are now made of aluminum. Well, if one fits it with a metal sunroof, that is now a steel sunroof, or in this case, glass. The second reason is the active arrow we talked about earlier as well. When one opens up the sunroof, that disturbs the active arrow. So in the front, remember how we said it's closed up to 43 miles an hour? Well, it's open when the sunroof is open. In the back, remember we talked about this coming up at 56 miles an hour. It extends further when the sunroof is open at 56 miles an hour. See? A sunroof ain't a sunroof, ain't a sunroof. Bit behind the scenes here, I got off the plane fully expecting to drive a manual transmission. Not one to be found, at least on this event. It is on offer, one can be fitted with a manual. Just every car they had here is all fitted with PDKs. And this is the 8-speed. Now remember, we are using mainly gears 1 through 4 on this track. There would be no need to be using 7 and 8 because those are overdrive gears. And the thing you notice is the transmission is significantly stronger. You realize that this thing can take more torque, and I would argue that it's not about this application, meaning 443 horsepower. It's designed to take more torque for later electrification rather than what we're doing here. This is just a nice benefit to have a stronger transmission in what will be the base car. My God, just as an aside here, I can't believe this is now the base 911. Suffice it to say, there are even more changes we have yet to get to as we make the transition to now Generation 8 of the 911, to the point where this episode could be hours, no exaggeration. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop it there. However, I am going to come back to you with a second episode from Spain. It's going to be a tech review with a 992, but different than other tech reviews we've done in the past, in that there is going to be driving in a circumstance that you and I have never driven a 911 together on camera before. So make sure you come back for that. That's going to premiere this coming Saturday, 992 tech review from Spain. In the interim, what have we learned with this little experiment? Well, I can't help but thinking about that old saying, as much as everything changes, it always stays the same, and it couldn't be more apropos for the 992. However, there are things that are significantly different and changed. Two absolutely jump out at you. First and foremost is the steering. The minute you get in the car, you realize it's completely transformational, but not to the point where it takes away that unique 911 driving characteristic. Like, that started back in '63 because they put everything in the wrong place, yet the car has become perfect over the past 55 years, and I don't know how they did it. And then there's that engine. And yeah, it's more power, and oh my God, that's great, but it's about how it delivers the power, not the power itself, to the point where you're scratching your head and you're saying to yourself, I can't believe this is now the base 911. What's the turbo in the GT3 gonna be like? And that is where we are at. We're at the beginning of this 8-year journey of all these coming flavors of 911s, GTSs, GT3s, turbos, whatever they may be, Targas of course. But here's the thing, in Generation 8, we're getting a flavor of it, or many flavors of it, that we've never seen on a 911 street car ever before, and that's electrification. Porsche has not been shy in sharing this with us, and they've made changes to the car to accommodate it. So let's take this as an opportunity and give them a wish list of what would we like to see with electrification in coming derivations of 911s. And this is where we got to say, do we want it to be all about power, not a bad thing, all about efficiency, or do we want to do something different and have it like get around different tax schemes around the world, or something that I'm not even mentioning here? So I'm going to turn this around to you guys. Let me know what you want to see in terms of electrification on future 911s. Most importantly, where you live and what is the current tax scheme that your car is subject to. And also let me know why you want that derivation of electrification. Let me know in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV on Word, MotoManTV on Word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And do want to leave you with two things before we go here. Number one, probably not a surprise to you. When I landed, Kumo and I were given a Mercedes E53 convertible, and as wonderful as that has been, for some reason he and I have been driving this a lot, leaving the Mercedes parked. And then number two, I do have to say a huge thank you, because we would not have gotten to this place where we are. Season 10, I can't even say the words, I'm still shocked about it, but season 10 and kicking it off with this great opportunity to drive the newest version of the most iconic car in the world. So, vielen Dank, gracias, thank you. I'm humbled. So I just want to share that with you, and Kumo obviously wants to share that with you too. So until we see you next time, which there is going to be an episode between now and that tech review, and Kumo will be part of it. So until we see you in that episode, bis später.